Sarah Chen stood at the massive window of the orbital station, watching Earth spin slowly below. The blue marble looked perfect now, with white clouds swirling over green continents and clear oceans. It was hard to believe that 200 years ago their home world had been dying. She remembered the stories her grandmother used to tell. Stories of brown skies, dead rivers, and cities choking on their own waste. The old woman would shake her head and say, "We thought it was the end, Sarah. We really thought humanity was finished." But then the Zephyrians came. Sarah turned away from the window as footsteps echoed in the corridor. Admiral James Rodriguez walked toward her, his face grim. Behind him came Dr. Marcus Webb, Earth's top legal expert, carrying a thick stack of papers. "How bad is it?" Sarah asked. Rodriguez sat down heavily in one of the station's chairs. "Worse than we thought." "Much worse." Dr. Webb spread the papers across the table. The documents were covered in strange symbols and flowing text that hurt to look at directly. This was Galactic Legal Code, the official language used by the Confederation for all major agreements. "When our ancestors signed this treaty with the Zephyrians," Webb began, "they thought they were agreeing to a simple trade deal. The Zephyrians would help fix Earth's environment, and in return, we would provide some resources and services." Sarah nodded. Every human child learned this story in school. The Great Rescue, the generous aliens who saved humanity from destruction. It was taught as the most important event in human history. "But our ancestors couldn't read Galactic Legal Code," Webb continued. "They trusted the Zephyrians to translate honestly. They signed based on what they were told the document said." "And what does it actually say?" Sarah asked, though she was starting to fear the answer. Webb pointed to a section of swirling text. "It says that Earth owes the Zephyrian Empire 847 trillion galactic credits for emergency planetary restoration services, plus compound interest at 12% per year." The number was so large that Sarah's mind couldn't really grasp it. She tried to imagine what 800 trillion of anything would look like and failed completely. "How much is that now?" Rodriguez asked quietly. "After 200 years of interest?" Webb's hands shook as he pulled out a calculator. "The debt now stands at approximately 4.7 quadrillion galactic credits." The silence in the room was deafening. Sarah felt like someone had punched her in the stomach. The number was impossible. Completely impossible. "There has to be some mistake," she said finally. "No one could ever pay that much money." "That's exactly the point," Webb replied. "I've been studying galactic law for the past 6 months, ever since the Confederation first contacted us about this debt. I've found similar cases involving dozens of other species." He pulled out another stack of papers. "The Quarantine mining clans. Debt of 2 trillion credits for asteroid mining equipment, now worth 50 trillion after 400 years. The Melodian artist colonies. 500 billion for cultural development programs, now worth 8 trillion after 3 centuries. Sarah began to understand. "This isn't about money at all." "No," Rodriguez said. "It's about control. The Zephyrians find struggling species, offer to help them, then trap them in impossible debt. Once a species can't pay, they become permanent servants of the Confederation." Webb nodded grimly. "I've read the fine print. If we can't pay within 1 standard galactic year, Earth loses its sovereignty. Humanity becomes what they call an indentured species. We work for the Confederation until the debt is paid, which will be never," Sarah added. "Correct. The math is designed to make sure the debt grows faster than any species can work it off. It's the perfect slavery system because it looks legal and fair on the surface." Sarah walked back to the window. Earth looked so peaceful from up here. Billions of humans down there had no idea what was coming. They were living their lives, going to work, raising families, completely unaware that their freedom was about to be taken away. "What about the other species?" she asked. "The ones already trapped in this system?" Rodriguez joined her at the window. "From what we can tell, most of them have given up. They accept their fate and do whatever work the Confederation assigns them. Mining, farming, construction, whatever jobs the Zephyrians don't want to do themselves. Some species tried to fight," Webb added. "The Quarantine clans attempted a rebellion about 50 years ago. It didn't go well. The Confederation has military technology that makes our best weapons look like sticks and stones." Sarah felt a cold anger building in her chest. The great rescue story she had grown up with was a lie. The benevolent Zephyrians who saved humanity were actually predators who had been planning to enslave them from the very beginning. "There's something else," Webb said quietly. I found records of what happened to species that tried to refuse the debt entirely. What happened? Their homeworlds were declared forfeit due to breach of contract. The Confederation took everything. Some species were scattered across the galaxy as refugees. Others just disappeared from all records. The weight of the situation pressed down on all three of them. Earth had been saved from environmental collapse only to face something much worse. At least climate change was a problem they could have worked on together. This was a trap with no visible way out. How long do we have? Sarah asked. The Confederation's High Tribunal sent their official demand 3 days ago, Rodriguez replied. We have exactly 1 standard galactic year to pay the full amount, or Earth becomes a Confederation protectorate and humanity becomes an indentured species. 1 year. 12 months to somehow find 4.7 quadrillion credits or lose their freedom forever. Has anyone ever successfully paid off one of these debts? Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. No, Webb confirmed. Not once in the 5,000-year history of the Confederation. The system is designed to be impossible. Sarah pressed her hand against the cool window. Down below, the lights of Earth's cities twinkled like stars. Each light represented thousands of people who deserved to live free, who had done nothing wrong except be born on a planet whose ancestors had trusted the wrong. Aliens. We need to tell Earth's government, she said. Finally. I've already scheduled a meeting with the Global Council, Rodriguez replied. But Sarah, you need to understand something. The Confederation isn't making this offer because they expect us to pay. They know we can't. They're going through the legal motions so they can claim they're being fair. What do you mean? I mean they expect us to beg for mercy, to accept slavery gracefully, to be grateful that they're not just taking Earth by force. Sarah turned away from the window. The anger in her chest was growing stronger, but it wasn't the helpless rage of a trapped animal. It was something else, something that felt almost like determination. Maybe they don't know humans as well as they think they do, she said. Rodriguez and Webb looked at her with surprise. What are you thinking? Rodriguez asked. I'm thinking that every human alive owes their existence to the work their ancestors did to build our civilization. We've survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and environmental collapse. We've gone from caves to space stations in a few thousand years. She looked back at Earth, spinning peacefully in the darkness. Maybe it's time the galaxy learned what humans do when someone tries to make us slaves. The three of them stood in silence, watching their home world turn. None of them knew exactly what would happen next, but one thing was certain. Humanity's response to this impossible debt would surprise everyone. The Global Council chamber had never been this quiet. Representatives from every nation on Earth sat around the massive circular table, staring at the holographic display that showed their impossible debt. 4.7 quadrillion galactic credits. The number floated in the air like a death sentence. President Elena Vasquez of the Americas Union was the first to speak. Are we absolutely certain there's no mistake? No legal loophole we can use? Dr. Webb shook his head from his position at the center of the chamber. I've spent 6 months reviewing every detail. The contract is airtight according to galactic law. We owe this money, and we have 11 months to pay it. What about appealing to other species in the Confederation? Asked Chancellor Liu from the Asian Federation. Surely some of them would help us. The other free species in the Confederation are the ones who benefit from this system, Admiral Rodriguez replied. They get cheap goods and services from the indentured species. They have no reason to help us. Sarah Chen watched the faces around the table. She saw fear, anger, and despair, but mostly she saw the look of people who had already given up. The same look that must have been on the faces of dozens of other species when they realized they had been trapped. What are our military options? Asked General Morrison from the African Coalition. Rodriguez pulled up another holographic display. None. The Confederation has weapons technology that's at least 200 years ahead of ours. Our entire global defense force couldn't handle a single one of their battle cruisers. Economic options? Tried Minister Yamamoto from the Pacific Alliance. Earth's entire gross planetary product for 1,000 years wouldn't even cover the interest on this debt, replied Treasury Director Hassan. We could sell everything on the planet and still owe more than we started with. The chamber fell silent again. Sarah could feel the weight of defeat settling over the room like a thick blanket. This was exactly what the Confederation expected. They wanted humanity to sit here, realize the situation was hopeless, and quietly accept slavery. There is one option we haven't discussed, Sarah said, standing up. All eyes turned to her. President Vasquez nodded for her to continue. We pay the debt. The reaction was immediate. Half the chamber burst into confused murmurs while the other half stared at her like she had lost her mind. Captain Chen, President Vasquez said carefully, we just established that payment is mathematically impossible. Not with money, Sarah replied. But the original contract doesn't specify that payment must be in galactic credits. It just says we owe a debt to the Zephyrian Empire for services rendered. Dr. Webb frowned as he pulled up the contract language on his tablet. She's right. The contract uses the word compensation rather than specifically requiring currency. What exactly are you suggesting? Asked Chancellor Liu. Sarah took a deep breath. She had been thinking about this ever since their conversation on the orbital station. We offer to work off the debt. Direct labor and services instead of money. The murmurs in the chamber grew louder. General Morrison stood up. You're talking about slavery. That's exactly what they want. No, Sarah said firmly. Slavery is when someone owns you and forces you to work. I'm talking about a business arrangement. We choose what work to do, how to do it, and we keep detailed records of the value we provide. Rodriguez was beginning to understand. You want to turn their trap against them. Exactly. They expect us to either pay impossible amounts of money or become helpless servants. But what if we offer something they don't expect? What if we offer to be partners? Treasury Director Hassan was running calculations on his tablet. Even if we could negotiate fair wages for our labor, it would still take thousands of years to work off this debt. Would it? Sarah asked. How much does the average galactic citizen earn per year? Hassan checked his galactic economic database. About 8,000 credits annually for standard labor. And how many working adults do we have on Earth? Approximately 4 billion, Sarah smiled. So if every working human took a job in galactic space, we'd earn about 32 trillion credits per year. We could pay off the debt in about 150 years. The chamber erupted in discussion. It was still a massive undertaking, but 150 years was at least a time frame that made mathematical sense. Wait, said Minister Yamamoto. You're talking about sending 4 billion people off Earth to work in space? Not all at once, Sarah replied. We start with volunteers. People who are willing to leave Earth temporarily to work on galactic projects. As we prove our value, we negotiate better contracts and higher wages. President Vasquez was studying the proposal carefully. And what makes you think the Confederation would agree to this? Because they need workers, Rodriguez said, understanding Sarah's plan fully now. Every empire needs people to do the actual work. The Zephyrians have been getting that labor from enslaved species for thousands of years. But what if they could get better workers who chose to be there? Dr. Webb was reading through galactic employment law. This could actually work. There are provisions for debt payment through service contracts. And if we structure it properly, we'd have legal protections that slaves don't get. Sarah nodded. More importantly, we'd be choosing our own assignments. Instead of being forced to do whatever jobs they give us, we could select work that matches our skills and interests. But 150 years is still multiple generations, pointed out Chancellor Liu. Are we asking our children and grandchildren to sacrifice their lives for this? Are we asking them to live as slaves instead? Sarah countered. At least this way they'd be working toward freedom. And who knows, maybe we can find ways to pay the debt faster than we think. Treasury Director Hassan was still running numbers. There's another factor to consider. If we're working in galactic space, we'd be earning galactic credits directly. We could build up our own savings and investments. Even if it takes 150 years to pay the debt, we'd emerge as a wealthy species rather than a broken one. The idea was starting to gain momentum around the chamber. Sarah could see it in their faces. The look of defeat was being replaced by something else. Not quite hope yet, but at least the possibility of hope. What would this look like practically? Asked General Morrison. How do we organize something this massive? We start with a volunteer program, Sarah replied. We call for people who are willing to work in galactic space for a few years. Engineers, scientists, doctors, teachers, artists, farmers, mechanics. Anyone with skills that might be valuable. And then, we send our best people to show the galaxy what humans can do. Not as slaves, but as professionals who take pride in their work. We prove that human labor isn't just cheap, it's superior. Admiral Rodriguez was nodding slowly. I like it. Instead of begging for mercy, we're offering to solve their problems. Instead of being victims, we're being partners. There's one more thing, Sarah added. If we do this right, we won't just be paying off our own debt. We'll be showing other indentured species that there's another way. Maybe we can help them find freedom too. The chamber fell quiet as everyone considered the implications. They weren't just talking about saving Earth anymore. They were talking about changing the entire galactic system. President Vasquez looked around the table. All in favor of authorizing Captain Chen to propose this plan to the Confederation? One by one, hands rose around the chamber. It wasn't unanimous, but it was close. Motion carried, President Vasquez declared. Captain Chen, you have authorization to offer the Confederation humanity's labor in payment of our debt. Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and terror. They were about to propose something that had never been tried before. Something that would either lead to freedom or disaster, but at least they were going to face their fate on their own terms. There's one thing the Confederation doesn't understand about humans, she said to the chamber. When we commit to something, we don't just do the minimum required. We do whatever it takes to excel. Admiral Rodriguez smiled grimly. They're about to learn that the hard way. 6 months after the Global Council's decision, Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of Kepler Station, watching human work crews transform what had been a dying space installation. The station orbited a gas giant in the Vega system, and when humans first arrived, it had been scheduled for decommission and scrap. Now it hummed with activity. The efficiency reports are in, said Marcus Torres, the station's new human supervisor. He handed Sarah a datapad with numbers that made her smile. We've increased cargo throughput by 312%, reduced processing time by 60%, and cut energy consumption by 40%. Sarah watched through the transparent aluminum windows as human engineers guided robotic construction units in rebuilding the station's docking bays. They weren't just following the original blueprints, they were improving them. How did the Zephyrian overseers react to the modifications? She asked. Marcus grinned. That's the best part. They stopped being overseers after the first month. Now they just stay out of our way and collect the profits. It had been the same story across dozens of systems. When the Confederation first agreed to humanity's labor payment plan, they expected to get cheap workers who would follow orders without question. Instead, they got something they had never experienced before: humans who cared about doing good work. Sarah's communicator chimed with an incoming message from Dr. Amanda Foster, who was leading the terraforming project on Kepler Prime. The message included video footage that made Sarah's heart race with pride. The planet had been a barren rock when humans arrived. Standard Confederation terraforming procedures would have taken 200 years to make it barely habitable. Human terraformers had done it in 6 months, and the planet wasn't just habitable, it was beautiful. Rolling green hills covered with earth plants stretched to the horizon. Clear streams ran between groves of trees that were already producing fruit. In the distance, she could see the beginning of what would become a major city, designed with human principles of efficiency and sustainability. How is this possible? Sarah asked Torres. The Confederation has been terraforming planets for thousands of years. How are we doing it better than they are? Torres pulled up another display showing comparative data. It's not that they don't know how to terraforming. It's that they've never had to care about efficiency or innovation. When you have endless slave labor, you don't need to find better ways to do things. That was the pattern Sarah had observed everywhere humans worked. The Confederation had built their entire economy around having cheap, disposable workers. They had never developed a culture of innovation or excellence because they had never needed to. Humans, on the other hand, had spent their entire history solving problems with limited resources. They instinctively looked for ways to do things better, faster, and more efficiently. Sarah's personal communicator buzzed with a priority message from Admiral Rodriguez back on Earth. She opened the secure channel and saw his excited face on the screen. Sarah, you need to see this, he said without preamble. I'm sending you the latest economic reports from across the Confederation. The data that appeared on her screen was remarkable. Every system where humans were working was showing massive increases in productivity and profitability. Space stations were handling more cargo. Mining operations were extracting more resources. Agricultural colonies were producing bigger harvests, but there was something else in the data that was even more interesting. Look at the worker satisfaction surveys, Rodriguez said. Sarah scrolled through the reports and found something she hadn't expected. The non-human workers in systems with human crews were reporting higher job satisfaction and better working conditions. What's causing this? She asked. Apparently humans don't just work hard themselves. They make everyone around them work better too. They share techniques, solve problems collaboratively, and treat other species as equals rather than competitors. Sarah thought about what she had observed on Kepler Station. The human crews didn't just work alongside the alien workers. They trained them, included them in planning meetings, and shared credit for successes. It was natural human behavior, but apparently it was revolutionary in the Confederation. There's more, Rodriguez continued. I've been getting requests from other systems. Non-human managers are specifically asking for human workers. They're willing to pay premium rates. That was news that changed everything. If demand for human labor was increasing, they could negotiate better contracts and pay off the debt even faster than planned. Sarah's communicator chimed again with an incoming message from Captain Janet Walsh, who was leading a human cultural exchange program on the artistic world of Melodia Prime. The message included recordings of the latest performances by human Melodian collaborative groups. The music was unlike anything Sarah had ever heard. Humans had brought concepts of jazz, rock, and electronic music to the Melodians, who had contributed their natural ability to create harmonics that touched the emotional centers of any brain. Together they were creating art that was spreading across the galaxy and generating massive revenue. It's not just work efficiency, Sarah realized. We're changing their entire culture, Torres nodded. I've been talking to some of the quarantine miners who work the asteroid belts near here. They say human crews have been teaching them new excavation techniques that are safer and more productive. For the first time in 400 years, quarantine workers are taking pride in their jobs instead of just surviving them. Sarah felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the station's environmental systems. Humanity wasn't just working off their debt. They were making the galaxy a better place. Her communicator buzzed with another message, this one from Dr. Sarah Kim, who was leading a medical research team on the scientific station orbiting Proxima Centauri. The message included research results that made Sarah's eyes widen. Marcus, look at this, she said, sharing the display. Dr. Kim's team has found treatments for 3 diseases that have been plaguing the galaxy for centuries. The research had been possible because humans approached medical problems differently than other species. Instead of accepting that certain diseases were simply incurable, human researchers kept asking why and what if, until they found answers. Torres whistled softly as he read the research summary. The Confederation medical establishment is calling it revolutionary. They want to fund 10 more human research teams immediately. Sarah's personal communicator buzzed with an urgent priority message. This one was from President Vasquez herself, and the expression on her face was a mixture of excitement and disbelief. Sarah, I need you to sit down for this news, the president said. Sarah remained standing, but braced herself. We've received a formal request from the Confederation Treasury Office. They want to renegotiate our debt payment terms. Sarah's heart skipped. What kind of renegotiation? They want to lower the total amount owed in exchange for guaranteed human labor contracts over the next 50 years. Apparently, the economic value we're generating is so high that they're willing to forgive part of the debt to ensure we keep working. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. In less than a year, humans had gone from desperate debtors to valuable partners. The Confederation wasn't just accepting their labor payment plan anymore. They were competing for access to human workers. How much of a reduction are they offering? Sarah asked. 60% of the total debt, President Vasquez replied. And they're offering to pay us above market rates for our services. Sarah had to sit down after all. 60% reduction meant the debt would be paid off in decades rather than centuries. Human children wouldn't grow up in the shadow of impossible debt. They would grow up as citizens of the galaxy. There's one more thing, President Vasquez continued. I've been getting informal communications from representatives of other indentured species. They want to know how we did it. They want to know if they can do the same thing. Sarah looked out at the bustling activity of Kepler Station. Human engineers were training quarantine apprentices in advanced construction techniques. Human artists were collaborating with Melodian composers on a symphony that would premiere next month. Human doctors were sharing research with Zephyrian medical teams, treating them as colleagues rather than masters. "Mr. President," Sarah said, "I think we're about to change more than just our own fate." Torres was monitoring communications from across the system, and his expression was growing more amazed by the minute. "Sarah, you need to hear this. I'm getting reports from 12 different systems where human crews are working. In every single case, the non-human workers are asking their human supervisors to teach them how to negotiate better working conditions. And what are our people telling them?" Torres smiled. "They're teaching them everything we know about labor organizing, contract negotiation, and workers' rights. They're spreading it across the galaxy." Sarah felt a profound shift in her understanding of what they were doing. They hadn't just found a way to pay off humanity's debt. They had accidentally started a revolution that was spreading from system to system, carried by human workers who couldn't help but treat everyone around them as equals, deserving of dignity and fair treatment. The Confederation had tried to trap humanity in debt slavery. Instead, humanity was teaching the galaxy what freedom really meant. Admiral Rodriguez stood in the secret meeting chamber deep beneath the surface of Titan Station, looking at representatives from 23 different species. The chamber had been built by human engineers specifically for this purpose, with advanced shielding that prevented any outside monitoring. What they were about to discuss would be considered treason by the Confederation. "Friends," Rodriguez began, using the translator device that allowed all species to understand each other, "we are here because humanity has discovered something that changes everything we thought we knew about the galactic debt system." The quarantine representative, a massive creature whose body was covered in rocky plates, shifted impatiently. "Human Admiral, my people have been slaves for 400 years. What could you possibly have discovered that we have not learned through centuries of suffering?" Dr. Webb stepped forward with a holographic projector. "We've discovered that the entire debt system is mathematically impossible by design. Not just difficult to pay off, actually impossible." He activated the projector, showing complex equations that filled the air above the table. "Every debt contract in Confederation history uses the same compound interest formula. The interest rate is always set at exactly 12%, which sounds reasonable, but there's a hidden clause that most species miss." The Melodian representative, whose flowing form seemed to shimmer with musical notes, leaned forward. "What kind of clause?" "Administrative fees," Webb explained. "Every transaction, every payment, every legal filing related to the debt incurs additional charges. These fees compound monthly and are added to the principal amount owed." The hologram showed a timeline of payments, even when a species made substantial payments toward their debt. The total amount owed continued to grow. "This means that no matter how hard an indentured species works, no matter how much they pay, they will always owe more than they started with," Webb continued. "The system is designed to ensure permanent slavery." The chamber erupted in angry sounds from multiple species. Roars, musical discords, and clicking sounds of rage filled the air. Rodriguez waited for the noise to die down before continuing. "But that's not the worst part," he said. "We've also discovered that this system is completely unnecessary for the Confederation's economy." He activated another display showing economic data from across the galaxy. The actual cost of the services provided to indentured species represents less than 1% of the Confederation's total economic output. They could forgive every debt immediately and barely notice the financial impact. The quarantine representative's rocky exterior began to glow with internal heat, a sign of extreme anger in his species. "Then why continue this system?" "Control," said Captain Chen, who had just arrived from her assignment in the Vega system. "It's not about money. It's about maintaining a permanent underclass that has no legal rights and no political power." She pulled up another set of data. Over the past year, humanity has been tracking the flow of wealth in the Confederation. 97% of all galactic resources are controlled by just 3 species: the Zephyrians, the Arcturians, and the Centauran Empire. Everyone else is either indentured or lives in fear of becoming indentured. The representative from the Avian Skylar Confederacy, whose feathers were ruffled with agitation, spoke in her species' melodic language. The translator converted it to standard galactic. "What do you propose we do with this information?" "We cannot fight the Confederation militarily." "We don't need to fight them," Rodriguez replied. "We need to make their system collapse from within." He gestured to Dr. Webb, who brought up a new display showing the economic impact of human labor, across Confederation space. In just 18 months, human workers have increased productivity in every system where they operate by an average of 400%. But more importantly, they've been training other species to work at the same level of efficiency and innovation. Chen nodded. Human work crews don't just complete their assigned tasks. They solve problems, improve systems, and teach others. It's changing the fundamental nature of labor across the galaxy. How does this help us? Asked the representative from the Aquatic Oceanic Alliance, whose words bubbled through a translation device. Because the Confederation is becoming economically dependent on the improvements we're making, Rodriguez explained. Systems that have human workers are now generating 10 times more wealth than systems that rely on traditional indentured labor. And that gives us leverage, Chen added. The Confederation leadership is starting to realize that their old system of forcing minimum effort through fear is less profitable than our system of encouraging excellence through cooperation. Webb activated a recording that had been secretly captured from a Confederation administrative meeting. The voices belonged to high-ranking Zephyrian officials. The human contamination is spreading faster than we anticipated, said the first voice. Worker productivity in systems without human presence is beginning to decline as other species demand the same working conditions and training opportunities. The quarantine mining clans are openly refusing overtime assignments unless they receive human-style safety training, said another voice. The Melodian artists are demanding creative control over their projects instead of just following prescribed propaganda templates. Most concerning, said a third voice, the indentured species are beginning to communicate with each other across system boundaries. They're sharing techniques and organizing joint resistance to traditional labor practices. The recording ended, and the chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. You see, Rodriguez said quietly, we're not just working off our debt. We're accidentally teaching the galaxy how to be free. The quarantine representative's internal glow was shifting from angry red to thoughtful blue. What exactly are you proposing? Chen stepped forward. We're proposing a coordinated economic disruption. Not a rebellion that uses violence, but a work action that demonstrates the true value of cooperative labor. She activated a galactic map that showed human work sites and the locations of other indentured species. On a predetermined date, every human worker in Confederation space stops working. At the same time, workers from other species demand the same rights and working conditions that humans have been promoting. A general strike, Webb explained, but not a traditional one. We're not demanding better treatment for ourselves. We're demanding it for everyone. The Melodian representative's form shimmered with harmonious colors. And if they refuse? Then we demonstrate what the galaxy economy looks like without cooperative labor, Rodriguez replied. Production drops to pre-human levels. Innovation stops. Quality declines. The Confederation's wealthiest systems begin to lose massive amounts of money. The Skylar representative's feathers began to arrange themselves in patterns that indicated deep thought. How long would we need to maintain such an action? According to our economic projections, less than 6 months, Webb answered. The Confederation's economy has become so dependent on human-style productivity that they can't afford to lose it for long. Chen brought up another display, showing communication networks that human workers had been quietly establishing across the galaxy. We've been building secure communication channels between work sites for the past year. When the time comes, we can coordinate actions across thousands of systems simultaneously. But there's something more important than just ending our own debt slavery, Rodriguez said. We have an opportunity to end the entire system permanently. He showed them legal documents that human lawyers had been preparing in secret. We're going to challenge the fundamental legality of the debt system itself. We've found precedents in galactic law that make the compound interest formula a violation of basic sentient rights. If we can get the case before the Galactic Supreme Court with evidence of systematic fraud, we can have every indentured debt in the galaxy declared null and void, Webb added. The chamber erupted again, but this time the sounds were of hope rather than anger. For the first time in centuries, the indentured species of the galaxy could see a path to freedom that didn't require violence or suicide missions. The quarantine representative stood slowly, his massive form towering over the others. Human Admiral, if we do this thing, if we follow your plan, what guarantee do we have that it will succeed? Rodriguez looked around the chamber at the faces of species that had been enslaved for hundreds or thousands of years. There are no guarantees, but I can tell you this. Humanity has learned that freedom is not something that someone gives you. It's something you take for yourself. And we've learned something else, Chen added. When people work together as equals, when they're treated with dignity and respect, they can accomplish things that seem impossible. The oceanic representative bubbled thoughtfully. When would this action begin? 6 months from today, Rodriguez replied. That gives us time to prepare, to spread the word, and to make sure every indentured species in the galaxy knows that they have allies. One by one, the representatives stood and indicated their agreement. The quarantine with his glowing affirmation, the Melodian with a harmony of colors, the Skylar with perfectly arranged feathers. The Galactic Supreme Court had never seen anything like it. The massive chamber that normally held perhaps 50 observers was packed with representatives from over 200 species. The air hummed with translation devices working overtime to convert the dozens of languages being spoken simultaneously. Sarah Chen sat at the plaintiff's table, surrounded by lawyers from 17 different species who had volunteered to help present humanity's case. Across from them, the Confederation's legal team looked smaller and somehow less confident than they had just a year ago. Chief Justice Valdor, an ancient Arcturian whose crystalline form had presided over galactic law for 3 centuries, called the session to order. The chamber fell silent except for the soft hum of translation devices. This court will now hear the case of humanity versus the Galactic Confederation regarding the legality of compound debt contracts and the practice of permanent indentured servitude. Dr. Webb stood to present humanity's opening argument. Over the past year, he had become the galaxy's leading expert on galactic constitutional law, and his research had uncovered legal precedents that the Confederation had hoped were forgotten. Your Honor, Webb began, we are here today not just to challenge a single debt, but to expose a system of financial fraud that has been operating in violation of the Confederation's own founding principles for over 5,000 years. He activated a holographic display that showed the mathematical analysis of every debt contract in Confederation history. Every single indentured debt uses the same formula, with hidden fees designed to ensure that payment is mathematically impossible. This represents systematic fraud on a galactic scale. The Confederation's chief lawyer, a Zephyrian named Executor Voss, objected immediately. Your Honor, these contracts were entered into voluntarily by species that needed assistance. The terms were clearly explained and legally binding. Were they? Webb countered. He brought up recordings of the original contract negotiations, including the one between Earth and the Zephyrian Empire. These recordings show that contract terms were deliberately misrepresented to species who could not read galactic legal code. The recordings played across the chamber's speakers. Even through the translation devices, it was clear that humanity's ancestors had been told they were signing a simple trade agreement, not a permanent debt enslavement contract. Chief Justice Valdor's crystalline form flickered with what experienced court observers recognized as deep thought. Dr. Webb, what remedy does your client seek? We seek the immediate nullification of all compound debt contracts in Confederation space, the freedom of all indentured species, and the establishment of new economic relationships based on mutual consent and fair compensation. The chamber erupted in whispers and gasps. Sarah watched the faces of the Confederation representatives and saw something she hadn't expected. Fear. Justice Valdor called for order. This court will now hear evidence regarding the economic impact of the current debt system. Admiral Rodriguez took the stand and presented data that human economists had been collecting for 2 years. Your Honor, our analysis shows that the current system of indentured labor actually reduces galactic economic output by approximately 40% compared to cooperative labor models. He showed comparative productivity data from systems with human workers versus systems using traditional indentured labor. When workers are treated as partners rather than slaves, they innovate, solve problems, and increase efficiency. The Confederation's own economic records support this conclusion. Executor Voss stood to cross-examine. Admiral Rodriguez, isn't it true that your species has benefited enormously from Confederation technology and resources? Don't you owe a debt of gratitude for the salvation of your planet? Rodriguez smiled. Executor Voss, our planet was dying because of environmental damage. The Zephyrian Empire provided technological assistance that helped us restore our ecosystem. We are grateful for that assistance. Then you acknowledge the validity of the debt. We acknowledge that assistance was provided. However, we have calculated the actual cost of that assistance based on current galactic market rates for terraforming technology and services. Rodriguez activated a display showing detailed cost analysis. The total value of assistance provided to Earth was approximately 800 million galactic credits. Not 800 trillion. The original debt amount was inflated by a factor of over 1 million. The chamber fell silent. Even the translation devices seemed to pause as the implications sank in. Furthermore, Rodriguez continued, in the 2 years since humanity began working in galactic space, we have provided labor and innovations worth over 12 trillion galactic credits. We have not only repaid the actual cost of assistance received, we have generated a surplus that exceeds the original debt by a factor of 15. Sarah watched the Confederation's legal team huddling in desperate conversation. This wasn't going according to their plan. Justice Valdor called for the next witness. Captain Chen took the stand to present evidence of the broader impact of humanity's work across the galaxy. Your Honor, human workers have been tracking the social and economic changes that have occurred in systems where cooperative labor has been introduced. The results demonstrate that the indentured system is not only legally questionable, but economically counterproductive. She showed data from dozens of systems. In every case where traditional slave labor has been replaced by cooperative partnerships, system productivity has increased by an average of 400%. Tax revenues have tripled. Quality of life for all residents has improved dramatically. Most importantly, Chen continued, crime rates have dropped to near zero. Political stability has increased and innovation has flourished. The cooperative model produces better outcomes for everyone, including the previously dominant species. Executor Voss objected. Your Honor, these alleged improvements are the result of advanced human technology, not changes in labor practices. Chen smiled. Actually, Executor Voss, that's not accurate. Human workers have been forbidden from introducing any technology not already available within the Confederation. All improvements have been achieved using existing galactic technology, applied more efficiently through cooperative labor practices. She brought up specific examples. The Kepler station productivity improvements were achieved by reorganizing workflow patterns. The Melodia Prime agricultural increases came from crop rotation techniques that have been known for millennia. The quarantine mining efficiency gains resulted from better safety protocols that reduced equipment downtime. In every case, the improvements came from treating workers as thinking partners rather than disposable tools. Justice Valdor's form was flickering more rapidly now. Captain Chen, what evidence do you have that these cooperative practices can be maintained without human supervision? We have extensive evidence, Your Honor. In 17 systems where human workers have completed their assignments and departed, the cooperative practices have continued. Local workers have maintained and even improved upon the systems we introduced. She showed follow-up reports from systems where humans had worked months or years earlier. The quarantine mining clans have increased their efficiency an additional 30% since our crews left. The Melodian artistic cooperatives are producing works that are generating record tourism revenue. The Skylar agricultural collectives have developed new crop varieties that are being adopted across the galaxy. Sarah felt a profound pride as she watched the evidence mount. Humanity hadn't just found a way to pay their debt. They had proven that cooperation was more powerful than domination. Your Honor, said a new voice from the gallery. Sarah turned to see the quarantine representative who had attended their secret meeting on Titan Station. I request permission to address the court. Justice Valdor considered the request. This is highly irregular. However, given the scope of this case, I will allow brief statements from affected parties. The massive quarantine moved to the witness area. Your Honor, my name is Thrakad, and I speak for the quarantine mining clans. We have been indentured to the Confederation for 412 years. We have paid our original debt 17 times over. Yet we were told we still owed more than when we started. His rocky exterior began to glow with controlled emotion. 2 years ago, human workers came to our system. They did not treat us as slaves. They treated us as colleagues. They taught us techniques that made our work safer and more efficient. They shared their food, their stories, and their dreams of freedom. Most importantly, they showed us records of our own debt contracts and helped us understand that we have been victims of systematic fraud. We stand with humanity in demanding justice. One by one, representatives from other indentured species took the stand to give similar testimony. The Melodians, the Skylers, the Oceanic Alliance, and dozens of others. Each told the same story. Human workers had treated them as equals, shared knowledge freely, and helped them understand their legal rights. When the testimony concluded, Justice Valdor called for closing arguments. Thank you for watching and comment for next part.